Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Wednesday, January 29th, 2025. Time for all sorts of things. Time for a new show. Time for new Lunar New Year, if you like. And if you don't, I guess you can hold on to the old one. It was no great shakes, but you can if you wish. Let's see, all sorts of things to catch up with, including for those of you who may have panicked at the end of yesterday's show. I don't know what happened yesterday. I think it was because I didn't have any co-pilot yesterday. I figured it was Friday. It certainly felt like Friday. That was the most Friday feeling Tuesday in quite a while. And as I was closing out the show and realizing how much we hadn't gotten to, I started talking about how it was, well, this is all the time we have for the week, and we'll talk to Greg on Monday, and we will, but we'll also talk to him today because today's only Wednesday. I don't know what it was, but it certainly felt like Friday. Let's see. We were in the middle of, I guess we kind of knew what was going on, but yesterday we experienced something of I guess we'll call an unscheduled government shutdown, precipitated largely by, well, Elon Musk, as it turns out. And then Elon Musk also, while everything was semi-shut down, apparently decided it was within his bailiwick as not a member of the government at all, and in no way elected or appointed to anything, to email the entire federal civilian workforce and offer them early retirement buyouts, which, of course, he's not authorized to offer. He apparently offered them in amounts that the federal government is prohibited from paying. There's a whole system by which you retire from the federal civil service. And he just figured, well, because it's from the government, it's probably dumb. And I'm a businessman, so I could probably come up with a better one. And as it turns out, it was the one that he used to decimate the ranks at Twitter/X. And, right down to apparently to the subject line of the email. But I don't know. It was very complicated and very weird. And there's a whole story behind it, which is, I think, really a smaller story than yesterday's fake OMB order. And I still, honestly, I can't bring myself to think of this as a real document from OMB. There's no OMB director. And it was a wild scene yesterday as everybody scrambled to figure out whether or not they were shut down. Some people essentially tried to comply in advance in a way, saying, well, OMB says that the grant funding is going to be turned off, and we depend on grant funding, so we should start planning for the wind down of our programs. And as people began to panic and everybody realized that everybody in America at least knows somebody who's directly affected by one of the programs that was suspected, maybe, kind of, sort of being shut down, there was also this weird incident during which apparently by the end of the day, all 50 state Medicaid directors or the personnel on the ground in the state who essentially are responsible for making sure that everything is still working. We can continue to do our Medicaid stuff because we can continue to draw down federal funds, had reported, no, we can't. We've been locked out of the computer system, the web page, essentially, that we use, the portal, to connect and make sure that everything is still okay and we can draw down funds from the Treasury as necessary and as agreed. And they all said, no, we actually can't get into that. Now, the White House also had its first press briefing with the new press secretary. What's her name? Levitt? I forget. Something with a K. Caroline, Candy, Kookaburra. I don't remember which. But, Fox News, blonde cookie cutter type, as usual. For the Trump campaign, that is, came out and, obfuscated and lied left and right about everything, including this portal shutdown, which I guess she claimed, well, no. that's just a mistake. We're looking into that. Maybe there's some kind of a glitch, but all day long they couldn't get the glitch out of the way. Even though we've had to hear every day, every hour about Elon Musk living inside Donald Trump's shorts, as I was saying yesterday on Blue Sky. But, he's been camped out there, and we can't make a website work. What was the good of bringing this guy on? I thought this was the thing he was supposed to be a whiz at, but who knows? Now, apparently, we're assured that everything's fine. They're back online. There was some scheduled maintenance or whatever. Now, not that bothered anybody. Apparently, the scheduled maintenance on some federally owned and operated water pumps yesterday we found out about in California, which Trump decided was actually the United States military invading California. Perhaps the military invaded the computer systems and got them back online. Who knows? Whenever anything miraculous gets fixed, even though it was supposed to be scheduled maintenance, we have to guess at which army did it. It was Obama's secret army. You remember they were training them. Haven't had to use them, but lots of training in secret, of course. So yesterday they invaded the internet and fixed the Medicaid portal. So many things going on. So many things we'll have to review, and of course we'll have to sift through all of the social media postings insisting that the things that we want to talk about are in fact distractions from some other thing. Everything's a distraction from something, obviously, but really that the invasion of not only the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, with their weird memo, which again, I keep coming back to the fact that I guess if I got a memo that purported to be from the Office of Management and Budget that, well, for one thing, spent so much time railing about Marxism, and then for another, so wildly misstated the size of the federal budget, I would think this is 3 kids stacked in a trench coat and not the OMB. And of course, there's no OMB director, but there's supposed to be people who have been working there and who understand things like how to Google how much the federal budget is. And when you write a memo about the federal budget and say overstate it by 40%, I say, and you come up with a dumb round number from out of nowhere, $10 trillion. It's like, you're from the OMB? Yes. All right. If you're from the OMB, you should be able to tell me how big the federal budget is. $10 trillion? All right. I don't think you're really who you say you are. And the same thing, the other O that got invaded was, as we said, when Elon Musk sent out his mass email, apparently he kind of took over the OPM, the Office of Personnel Management, another big government functionary office. And I got a story parked somewhere we'll get to later once we talk to Greg a little bit about things, about the mechanics of how they did that, because there's no government-wide email list normally of I want to write to everybody who works in the federal government, and there are reasons why there isn't one. And then if you read a little bit about how they circumvented that, essentially they came in and plugged in their own servers. You remember when plugging in your own server was a huge risk and maybe subjected all sorts of sensitive government documents and information to hackers and other international actors of sorts. Well, that's what they did. They came in and plugged in their own servers and overrode everything, and they used them to spoof OPM addresses to essentially install their own skimmer on top of the servers so that they could send out emails that looked like they came from OPM and offer these people these fake buyouts. By the end of the day, everybody had to get an email from their actual agency saying, do not answer, maybe do not even open that email that says it's offering you a buyout with this title. We're not sure about the security of the thing. If you respond to it, you could seriously jeopardize your pension. We're actually at that point where we have to warn people that things that ostensibly came from the government are, well, they might be hoax emails, and you might be sending your money to a Nigerian prince. All right, Greg Dworkin is here. We think he alleges to be Greg Dworkin. We don't know for sure. There's no way of verifying this. Anything can be spoofed on the internet. But as long as it sounds like Greg, we'll take it. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
There, see, it sounds like him.
So I believe send you a a memo, maybe a
Maybe.
Skype
Who knows?
offer for a buyout so that you
I'll
can
take it.
do what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, you could
Which
probably...
is essentially saying that you get to work from your desk until September. It's an offer to telework. There's no cash involved.
Well, that's interesting, considering the previous memo said no one's allowed to telework.
Right. Now, Garrett Haake from NBC reported the Trump administration's offering every federal employee, this was early in the day till it was straightened out, in effect a buyout with pay until September. If they choose to take it, federal employees will begin receiving the email this afternoon. White House thinks 5 to 10% could take the offer, saving $100 billion. But Christina Henderson on X pointed out every media headline is calling it a buyout. When you read the actual email, and this is from OPM, it's simply an offer to telework until September, no cash buyout. Whether that's the real one, whether that's the Elon Musk fake one, nobody knows. But Tim Kaine actually got on the Senate floor and said federal employees should not, just as you were saying, it's not just the supervisors. A senator on the floor said, don't do this. President has no authority. There's no budget line to pay people. This is fake.
That's
if you
it.
accept the offer and resign, you get stiffed.
Yeah, apparently the email comes along with a set of
So maybe
buttons.
that was the plan. The plan
end
was to scare people into resigning, and then we don't have to pay you. You quit.
Right, or entice them into it. I've been thinking about quitting anyway because things are getting so crazy, and then you're offered this thing that says, essentially it was a click here if you want to accept the resignation package.
But bait and switch is illegal.
Yeah, well, a lot of things are illegal, up to and including. Most people thought they were being offered a buyout that, as it happens, is well in excess of there's an existing federal cap how much they can pay you in an early retirement situation, and the payout is capped at $25K.
Rules, regulations, and things that are written on paper.
Yeah.
You don't even think that people are actually certified until the paper actually walks to the right place and somebody sees it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it would have served everybody very well yesterday. Honestly, all of the planning that was done for complying with the first crazy memo looks like wasted time. And it is. And I know that you might think, well, why would you bother with something that could be so quickly found out and or reversed? And the answer is any amount of time that the bulk of the federal government spends chasing its own tail and not doing anything is a bonus for us.
Well, that's part of it.
They don't care.
That's part of it.
Yeah.
Part of it is I want to have the media, which is my lapdog, perceive anything I do as a win because I'm strong.
Right.
And even if it gets sorted out later, that's on page 9.
Yeah. The correction, of course, always comes later and never gets the attention. Too boring.
When I wrote the pundit roundup yesterday, the headline was FAFO will hit voters well before it hits Republicans, but then it catches up. And the picture that I chose to illustrate the piece was just a picture of the Supreme Court, and the caption says, might as well keep the SCOTUS pick here because everything's headed there.
Yeah.
And that was before all of this stuff got, what is going on here.
Yeah.
So in that line, before we dive into the chaos,
all right,
I want to mention a couple of special elections that happened yesterday, which may or may not be significant.
They're special anyway.
They're definitely special, and they were elections.
All right. So the name fits.
Despite the fact that Trump is president, elections still happen.
Boo.
In eastern Iowa, which is a Trump 21 district, plus 21.
Is it already caucuses? Wow.
Mike Zimmer, the Democrat, beat Katie Whittington, the Republican, 52-48. So the Democrats flipped an Iowa seat in SD 35. They just did. And then in
and
very
Soda, Republican seat. Yeah.
A tie at the Minnesota Senate has come to an end as the DFL, that's Democratic Farmer Labor Party, because Minnesota has this history.
Mm-hmm.
Doron Clark is projected to win the special election for District 60 with 90.9% of the vote. That's a 14-point improvement over how Harris did in that district.
Which means Harris did awesome. 90.
Harris did awesome.
Holy cow.
And Doron Clark did awesomer. So two special election, two Democratic wins. And that's what I meant about the voters are going to see it before the The Republicans in the House and Senate feel it.
Well, I just felt it.
They're not going to be happy when stuff that they didn't think they were,
signing up for
face eating party. Yeah, but they didn't think it was going to happen to them.
Right. Well, that's one of the things.
If it happens to their enemies, but they didn't think it was going to happen to them. And so, things happen, and people aren't always happy about it. So I just thought I would mention that first. Now, while this is going on, Sean Duffy was nominated to be Secretary of Transportation. I don't care whether he won or not. I don't even know.
Okay.
The story I'm telling you
sure.
is Lisa Blunt Rochester, who's the new senator from Delaware. Beat Larry Hogan.
He's from Maryland, though.
Maryland.
Oh, she's from Maryland then?
Delaware.
Delaware. Okay, but Larry Hogan is from nearby.
Senator Lisa Blunt Rochester is the new senator from Delaware.
There was probably a witch running on the other side. I don't remember.
Earlier today, I voted no on Sean Duffy's nomination to be Secretary of Transportation. As a member of the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, I had one-on-one conversations with Mr. Duffy about critical transportation and infrastructure initiatives Delawareans rely on. Delawareans, that's a good one.
There's an extra syllable, I think, in there. But all right, that's the correct way. Delawareans, not Delawareans. Delawarites.
That's the way she writes it. Delawareans. Delawareans.
All right.
DeLoreans.
That's cool.
We had productive discussions, and I voted him out of committee. I was prepared to vote yes on his confirmation today on the floor, but with Donald Trump's decision last night to unconstitutionally freeze funding approved by Congress, I couldn't support his nomination.
Okay, that's a good decision.
So here we have the point that Democrats could slow things down, could demand everything be put to a vote, voice vote. There's no unanimous consent to anything. They could bring the Senate to a crawl if they so chose, and it's about time that they so chose, because this is the kind of stuff that absolutely deserves that kind of reaction.
Yeah.
And no, it's not an overreaction. And Dick Durbin, sit down. This isn't collegial. Let's preserve the blue slips, because that's the way we've always done it. Shut up, sit down, retire.
Wow. Did he oppose that idea? Because
no,
I think
his blue slip shtick.
I see.
It's representative of older Democrats in Congress, and they need to go, all of them.
Yeah. Well, certainly that mode of thinking, and this is the kind of event that sometimes, at least temporarily, stimulates that sort of thinking. Although I understand that there was a meeting of the Democratic Senate caucus where the question was, well, shouldn't we be just voting no in general on all of these nominees, especially given what just happened with the spending power grab? And they couldn't decide to unify behind it. A lot of people will do it anyway, but they wouldn't make it the caucus position, which is kind of not great. I don't know whether Durbin was behind it, but
you were absolutely right at the beginning of the show. This is a government shutdown.
Yes,
and you have to treat it as such. And government shutdowns are poison for the party that promotes it. And why Democrats aren't just understanding, a lot of them do, but not enough of them do. So that's why I said that about Dick Durbin.
Well,
I don't know if Durbin is or isn't, but that's representative of the kind of thinking that got us here in the first place.
We should see
Lisa
if we can
Murkowski says she's been hearing from constituents all morning on concerns about the funding freeze,
early in Alaska,
citing a range of housing and infrastructure projects, and wouldn't say if this affects House or vote on Russ Vought's OMB position.
That, of course, is who should be. I mean, that should be the target number one. You just say, this is the guy who precipitated this. Before he was even in government, he usurped our power. He's a no.
Both Elon Musk and this guy who isn't in government are doing stuff that's blatantly illegal, and they need to be held responsible for it. And every Democrat ought to be up with that message. Catherine Rampell
Come on, guys.
Writes on Twitter, if you had any doubt about whether this OMB funding freeze was illegal, this should remove it. Medicaid is mandatory spending. So whatever they screwed up yesterday, that also needs to be investigated. Yeah, they can claim it was just routine maintenance. It was just routine sabotage of the government. There was nothing special about it. But multiple states were locked out of the Medicaid portal.
All of them eventually.
And Brian Schatz, senator, said multiple states are locked out of the Medicaid portal. This is a Trump shutdown, except that this time it's unlawful. Again, that's the kind of message that you need. So With
All
that
right.
in mind, there's two things. First, the technical and then the political.
All right.
First is the technical, and this is a thread from Matt Glassman, who I like to call him because he sort of understands how Congress works.
Yeah, he's always fun. I mean,
And
for me. People like me think he's
people like me, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. People like me, people like you. Well, things that you like, I tend to like, which is why I'm on the show.
right.
Okay, impoundment, he writes.
Uh,
Some links to relevant authorities and commentary, and then thoughts of my own. What Trump is proposing potentially amounts to an upending of the separation of powers.
Yes.
That may not be inherently bad, but in this
It
case,
is.
it's really bad.
Oh, it's inherently bad. All right.
The facts: last night, the Trump administration, via OMB, put out a memo directing agencies to temporarily pause all obligation or disbursement of federal financial assistance. It's couched in terms like consistent with law, but under current law and court precedent, the only way POTUS can temporarily pause spending of appropriated funds, and this is the key, Congress already appropriated these funds.
Yes.
It's via the Impoundment Control Act, which requires specific notice to Congress, which isn't mentioned in the memo.
Mm-hmm.
Under current law, namely the Impoundment Control Act, the executive is required to spend funds appropriated by Congress with narrow exceptions. There's a process for the executive to pause funds and request Congress to consider rescinding them.
Right.
There's a CRS link to that whole process.
Oh, yeah. I should probably read that.
Well,
I just
I'll send
remember
it to you.
it. Okay.
But none of it is what actually happened.
Yeah. Well, I'm not reading it on the air. It's probably
No,
18,
but
20
for later,
pages
for
long.
reference.
But yeah, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Here's a very nice Steve Vladeck write-up that goes through all of this. What I'd like to discuss is the
We may have read
consequences.
that one yesterday.
As I wrote last month, accepting inherent presidential authority to impound is akin to shifting the balance of power to something that resembles 16th century England.
Oh, that was a great England.
If Congress, make England great again. If Congress is reduced, or make America England again. If Congress is reduced to only being, well, after all, they have a king. If Congress is reduced to only being able to negatively appropriate, that is, to refuse to provide funds,
Yes.
you completely upend the balance of power. How can Congress build a military if it wants if a POTUS can unilaterally cut funding by 80%? Even worse, that kind of presidential power would make bargaining over spending impossible because the executive could unilaterally renege on any deal.
Well, Trump would never do
the threat
that.
of a renege to force members to his side. A Congress in this position wouldn't be helpless. They'd have negative power, but that's very weak, inconsistent with the vision of the framers, and all of this is a long time coming. I've complained about lawless spending from Obama on Medicaid and Biden on student loans, but Trump is taking it up to 11 here. He's impounding things, and impoundment makes unauthorized spending look like child's play. My gut reaction is that all of this will get laughed out of the courts, but there's no other reasonable decision. Pro-impoundment people love to pretend it was normal in American history right up until the Nixon disputes, but they're wrong, usually conflating saving money with impounding funds. And all of this said, Congress should not rely on the courts. The courts are not Congress's friend. They have plenty of power to retaliate.
Their own
If push comes
power.
to shove, they should use the negative appropriation power and threaten to zero out all funds for OMB.
Well, I mean, yeah,
President
Republicans
has no
would.
constitutional right to EOP staffers that help him, or to a mansion on Pennsylvania Avenue, or to a plane. Congress can rescind the money on all of that stuff. Now, does
That's
Congress
true.
have the spine to do that? I doubt it, but a full frontal assault on the appropriations power is game, set, match for Congress. And one thing I forgot to note, the Impoundment Act doesn't apply to funds Congress directly mandates to be spent by law, like Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
You can't screw with Medicaid. The law says you have to spend
And
it.
yeah,
It's-
we watched it happen, but yeah.
Well, then you get taken to court. So that's the technical aspects of it. And again, you have to step back and look at the big picture. The big picture is that they're a combination of evil and stupid. You have to be, because if you're going to have Elon Musk, who's not part of the government, and Russell Vought, who's not part of the government yet, start doing things, that's stupid.
Yes, and it's Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, and she actually answered this questions, or the people had about, hey, what the hell's going on with the government? She actually said, call Russell Vought. And a few reporters noted in their write-ups later on, Russell Vought is not in the government. What am I going to call him for? And what an answer that was. Also, she was asked, hey, I'm told that everybody's locked out of Medicaid.
To her face?
I don't know. Maybe they did, but that doesn't make the the video cut because it's everybody yelling it at once. But yeah, I saw it observed on social media and often by reporters who say they were in the room or who were watching the press conference. But yeah, I mean, I don't know whether you can hear it when people yell. That's crazy. He's not even in the government. Could have been a good follow-up question, but everybody needs to film themselves asking the same question.
Right. So I'm going to introduce and start a thread by Chris Murphy, which I'll finish after, which is the political part of it.
Oh, yes, I see.
And Chris Murphy says, look, Trump is trying to oversaturate us with nonstop chaos so we can't react meaningfully. But Friday's global stop work order on almost all U.S. aid, for example, is dumb and murderous, and you need to know about it. So let me give you a short thread on this evil.
All right, we'll start now.
First of all, it's not a funding pause. It's a stop work order. So today we just stopped feeding babies and housing refugees and mediating conflicts all around the world. Aid organizations are laying off staff and many programs will not restart. One of the things that they didn't fund are the guards who guard ISIS in Syria, new Syria.
New Syria, right.
Right, the old Syria is a different issue. But with the new Syria, what happens is you were paying people to guard the ISIS folks. No money, no foreign aid. Guards don't show up to work. They're like the agricultural workers in California. Now what? No guards in a prison with murderous people who are trying to kill you. What do you think those people are going to do?
Let me think about this for a minute.
They're going to leave.
Yeah, probably.
And then get back to
and that's the best case scenario, right? They left. Oh,
they left the prison.
Yeah, well, that's nice.
Tons of kids are going to die needlessly, and we'll pick up after.
To say the least. Yes, this is all true. This came up yesterday. I have some suspicions about whether or not the news reached the people guarding prisoners in Syria, but soon enough, like if it had gone on any longer.
My Syrian people are reporting it, so yeah, it did.
Well, then okay. I guess so. I just didn't know it was payday on Tuesday in Syria, but okay.
Hi, everybody. This is Scott Anderson, your summary guy. Were you looking forward to an egalitarian democracy free of bigotry, misogyny, racism, and greed, where people of different appearances, beliefs, and heritage had a right to live without fear, and everybody could expect a basic level of health, stability, and safety throughout their life? Well, too bad. The plain fact is we're heading in the wrong direction. And where we once had a voice in such things, increasingly we don't. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. However, if you're looking to join people who understand today's issues and can intelligently address the reality of today from your point of view, you can join us at Kagro in the morning. As you know, there aren't many of us out there, at least compared to them. We need to stick together. And by that I mean send us money. That is contributions to patreon.com. Secure, recurring contributions. Those contributions keep this show in the air and us together. We've been through a lot together. The temporary loss of the presidency, we hope. The temporary loss of the House, the Senate, and the Supreme Court, we hope. Face it, we are pretty much all that we have left. Remember, we couldn't do it without you, and you shouldn't do it without us. We're in this together, so thanks.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. There's no stop work order for us. We're not the government.
So here's an update. Charles Lister is the director of MEI Syria and founder of Syria Weekly, and a very reliable source who was reporting on the revolution the entire time, getting it right. He wrote on January 27th, which is Monday, in an era of great power competition, the best way to rapidly and simultaneously cede advantage on dozens of fronts is to end humanitarian aid and stabilization work worldwide, a truly stunning own goal illustrating weakness, not strength. And he wrote that as of yesterday, good news, the entire civilian management of two specific camps, Al-Hal and Al-Roj, camps containing 41,000 former residents of ISIS's, quote, state, end quote, the caliphate, is back to work today, the money having been turned back on by the State Department overnight.
Okay.
Good and vital course correction. The 180-degree reversal achieved overnight came in the form of a 2-week funding extension.
2 weeks, huh? I'm always suspicious of every 2 weeks.
Why we should be securing 40,000 former residents of ISIS.
That's a weird designation. Are we talking about people who moved to ISIS territory because they were pro-ISIS?
No, they declared the caliphate, and they were basically, quote, freedom fighters, end quote, which U.S. considers terrorists.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it made it sound like, well, residents of an area that ISIS took over, like, I don't know whether they had anything to do with it, but here, I guess, yes.
Well, how did they take over?
Apparently by democratic vote.
It's those people.
All right.
They're the ones in the camps.
There's people who vote for it. We visited their diners and asked them why they still support ISIS.
That's ISIS. Meanwhile, Al-Qaeda's all but defunct affiliate dissolved itself today.
Oh, well, there you go. Good news.
On the orders of Al-Qaeda General Command.
All right.
Right. So
turn out the lights.
There's no Al-Qaeda in Syria anymore, just so you know.
Good.
I mean, a terrorist is a terrorist. You can change your name and all of that, but
someone did.
You know, again, this is some of the good fallout that happens from Assad not being there. So, in any case, Chris Murphy, who is big on foreign affairs and understands foreign aid and understands that the U.S. isn't spending 65% of its budget on foreign aid. It's closer to 3%. Tons of kids are just going to die needlessly. Famine is struck in Sudan, but because of the freeze, our most important life savings program shut down. Within weeks or days, malnourished babies who rely on that food will die. In Lebanon, our programs to help fight against Hezbollah. And in Syria, money keeping the ISIS prison camps operating. So he notes that happened. If there's no winter fuel in the camps, there could be a riot that leads to a breakout from the camp. Trump is deporting millions of people while making conditions worse in the countries he's sending people back to. The people he deports will just wind up returning here. But that's the point. More immigration chaos. Aid programs were told to apply for waivers, but it's a joke. There's no waiver. It's just cruel busy work to further overwhelm and punish aid agencies, because cruelty is also the point. And the point of all of this is to destroy U.S. power in the world. That helps China. China, the place where all of Trump's billionaires make their products and want deals to open markets. There's a connection.
Yes. Well, it's certainly a true roundup. You can't turn on this is. Well, I don't know. If they were capable of learning, it would be a great lesson in what I always refer to here as, why don't you justism, right? We want to cut the budget. Why don't you just turn it all off? Well, Trumpers who'd think, I can fix the budget. What you do is you turn off all the budget, and then you only turn on select parts once you review it carefully. And then all the rest of the money that it was turned off is savings, and we can pay down the federal whatever it is, whether it's debt, deficit, but it does not work that way.
So 2-track discussion. That's the Matt Glassman track, which is like how this really works.
Yeah.
And then there's the Chris Murphy track, which is whether it's Tim Kaine on the Senate floor, talking about the buyouts, or Chris Murphy on the Senate floor talking about this stuff. There are Democrats who, without the presidential podium and without a Caroline Leavitt, are trying to get the message out that this is bad and it's stupid and you shouldn't be doing it, and they need to be held responsible when the results happen, because the results are never instant. I mean, sometimes they are,
well, certainly finding out that
then
there
it
was
has to get
bad
reported, and
things
then you have to
happening.
round up the data, and then you have to come back with it, this, that, and everything else. And so Murphy's point is this is going to matter. And I also refer to 2 posts that I put in the Pundit Roundup, also from Twitter, because this is where people write it, folks. It's not because I favor Twitter over Blue Sky.
Well, they're
Tom
Nazis.
Bonnier writes, my message to electeds, one of the big reasons we lost in 2024 was because people didn't see us as their champions. That's why I bring up Chris Murphy and Tim Kaine, and not Dick Durbin. You have the chance to change that starting now. Millions are desperately in need of your help in the face of Trump's funding freeze. Fight for them. Oh, and by the way, federal district judge should mention temporarily blocked Trump's freeze on federal grants and loans. There's a Monday morning hearing on that. And Aaron Fritschner, who's a Congress critter, chief of staff for somebody or other.
Oh, okay.
Never remember who. Among other things, this idiotic freeze seems like a great way for Russell Vought and the Heritage Zealots to achieve their fever dreams in a way that maximizes political risk for congressional Republicans in 2026. And that's why those special elections were so interesting to me that we started off the segment with.
That's the way that's the way special elections tend to go, especially when you're somebody like Trump and upending everything, and you give people an immediate opportunity to express their buyer's remorse.
But let's revise and extend those remarks.
Oh, okay.
One of the things that the special election teaches us is that in a low turnout election, the people who are pissed win. Democrats just won these two special elections.
Yes.
The point being that what's coming up in 2026 is not a presidential election where people come out of the woodwork who don't normally vote and they wind up voting for Trump.
Yes, so some people head back into the woodwork.
They will not show up in 2026. And if people are pissed and the pissed people win, then Republicans are going to be out in the House. I don't know about the Senate. But that's a BFD, as Joe Biden used to say.
Yeah.
And
it's
so,
weird, though.
The idea
that,
listen, Russ Vought and Elon Musk can just come in and cause chaos and nobody will care and nobody will notice and nothing ever happens to that's not the dynamic that's happening in 2026. Completely different dynamic. Completely different electorate. Every election, national election, has a different electorate. And the one that's going to come in 2026 is not MAGA. That's not their thing.
The thing that bothers me about it, though, is we saw a similar thing happen in the 2022 midterms, and then we thought, all right, so now, it's a long way to 2024, but we got to carry that momentum. People are still pissed.
I'm not talking about, 2028. I'm talking about just the next one.
Well, that's all. Look, I'll take it. We'll take that, whatever we can generate in terms of voter interest and bringing them back out. It's interesting that we always used to say
both a lifetime and an election away. You got to see what happens first.
I'm interested in terms of it wasn't so long ago that we used to say, oh, well, the problem is that we don't get people to turn out for the midterm elections. So you win the presidency back in the days when Democrats would win the presidency, and then you lose it in the very next, you lose the control of Congress in the very next midterm election, and we got to sustain the enthusiasm. And now it turns out the enthusiasm is for the buyer's remorse elections in the midterms. Interesting. And
so my friend Joe Lawrence, who is a columnist at the Bulwark and other places, kind of an independent columnist these days. She used to write for USA Today. She used to edit the USA Today editorial page.
I see.
Wrote a piece in the Bulwark 2 days ago. Sanity check after Trump's first week back in office is not quite pitch black, but that's no thanks to him. And talks about ways to cope.
Oh, all right.
One way she was coping is rearranging and cleaning out her spice rack, which she hasn't done since 1984, according to the dates on some of the spices. You got to do something to, just distract yourself. And then she added,
but
what turned out to be more helpful was a sampler-worthy phrase from Greg Dworkin, a friend and retired pediatrician who writes for Daily Kos.
How do you like that?
Rage is motivational, he told me, which I did.
You did?
Yes, it is. So is FOMO, fear of missing out. And I'm going to embrace both. As recovering lawyer George Conway put it, I think I'm going to get back in the practice of law. Seems like a lot of fun litigation's erupting, and I don't want to miss out. And all of that's going to be against the Trump administration. She writes, that's the right attitude. It's a terrible moment, but it's also a historic and challenging one. We can't and shouldn't try to avoid it. So point being, this midterm election is going to have a lot of disgruntled people who are going to turn out. And that's I think, what we need to focus on. That's what the politicians need to focus on, separate track, but parallel to the Matt Glassman technical parts of it, which is you can't do that. Not just, I know you just did, but it's going to fail in court because it's like blatantly illegal and you can't. Elon Musk is not the government. Russell Vought writing memos now is not the government. You can't do that.
Right. And it sometimes, in fact, works that the courts block it. And we figured, I thought yesterday, you're going to get a pretty quick injunction from a federal district court. Hopefully it'll happen in a place where the appellate court is a reasonable one and they'll let it stand. And I would say pretty good chance, even though there's the zealots on the Supreme Court, most of them Trump appointed, there's still pretty good evidence that people like even Roberts and certainly Amy Coney Barrett is embarrassed by this stuff.
with Alito and
they'll vote for it
Thomas
because
voting for it.
Right. So I think they can put together 3, maybe even 4 votes for some of this stuff, but the rest of it is just too embarrassing to people who worked hard and went to law school.
Gorsuch is a nice version of Alito. He's very nice.
Yeah.
But he votes like Alito. I don't understand him.
Me neither. He's a bit of a weirdo. But also, his family's been leeching off the federal government and living on federal government salaries for generations.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but he'll either do it as
but
a
he's
hypocrite
incredibly strong on First Nation issues. He's just such a weird paradox.
Yeah, I don't know. That is odd.
Anyway, Jennifer
explain
Bendery writes, Trump's nominee to lead OMB, Russ Vought, submitted this response to the Senate Budget Committee when asked by Senator Whitehouse, who won the 2020 election? Mm-hmm. The question,
RFK Jr.
Question number 32. Did Joe Biden win the 2020 presidential election? Answer, I believe the election was rigged. That's what he wrote.
I'm not even certain. Yeah, and is that supposed? Did he write it that way so that he could say, I didn't say he didn't win. I just said it was rigged. I didn't say how. It was rigged to be funny. That's it.
I'm saying that ought to be disqualified in and of itself.
Of course. But
and
so
if you
far
then start writing memos before you're in the government and you wind up doing all these illegal things, you got plenty of reason to vote against him. Murkowski was not happy.
No. I mean, my hope
You need Tim Tillis. Tim Tillis is such a wuss. He actually voted for Pete Hegseth after complaining about it. But you'll get Collins, you'll get Murkowski. You need a third.
Yes, that's the issue. And the third against Hegseth, to no avail. But the third was McConnell, so that's of interest. Yeah, that's the problem. Is well, we need a third. Well, we got a third. All right. Well, we need a fourth. I know.
Yeah, we did. I mean, if it were the House, it would have failed because it was a tie.
Right.
But,
yes.
In the Senate.
And I think there's a pretty good chance that you'll get the same 3 again on some of these nominees in reaction to this overreach.
And again, a good reminder, we didn't talk about this, but when you go back in the history of Senate confirmations for defense, you're talking about 80-20, 90-10, unanimous. Yes. I don't think anybody got as few as 75 in decades. And this was 51-50. That in and of itself should be disqualifying.
Yes. Right. I did see somebody say something. I don't know. It was a reporter saying the 51-50 because a tie was broken by Vice President J.D. Vance, saying this is one of the smallest margins in modern history. And of course, it's the smallest margin you could possibly get and still have a confirmation. And a 1 vote margin, that I would say is the smallest margin in all of history. Never mind modern history, because one has been won for a very long time. I don't know why they said
here's a longer form
I think it's
essay
a turn of
on
phrase.
The topics we've been discussing. This is from Russell Berman, and it's in the Atlantic. It's an illegal executive order, and it's stealing. That's a quote. Trump wants to go around Congress and freeze enormous amounts of federal spending. Can he?
Okay.
The next line of Trump's order made it clear that he was quite serious. All agencies shall immediately pause the disbursement of funds appropriated through the Inflation Reduction Act or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The president is apparently using Green New Deal as a shorthand for any federal spending he doesn't like.
Yeah, right. That's another thing. A lot of reference to that in the memo. It was a catchphrase, and we have not passed any such program ever.
And he didn't stop there. Yesterday, the White House ordered a pause on all federal grants and loans. It's an illegal executive order, and it's stealing. Representative Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut, the top Democrat on the House Appropriations Committee, told me, referring to the order targeting the Inflation Reduction Act and infrastructure law. Withholding money approved by Congress undermines the entire architecture of the Constitution, Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland told me.
He's right.
Maryland, Delaware, all these states.
Delaware.
It essentially makes the president into a king. Last night, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said that Trump's freeze on federal grants and loans blatantly disobeys the law. I mean, Democrats are getting their act together and calling it what it is. And at least it got publicized enough so this guy noticed it and stuck it in an article somewhere. The Constitution gives Congress. I saw Chuck Schumer's speech all over the nightly news, so that part got out. And that's the difference between Schumer saying it and, let's say, Chris Murphy saying it. The Constitution gives Congress a so-called power of the purse. During Trump's first term, the Nonpartisan Government Accountability Office found that the administration had violated that law by holding up aid to Ukraine, a move that became central to the 2019 impeachment. Trump has argued that the Impoundment Control Act is unconstitutional, so has his nominee, Russell Vought, who had the same job at the end of the president's first term. Vought also helped write Project 2025.
Yes.
In his Senate confirmation hearings this month, Vought repeatedly refused to commit to abiding by the Impoundment Act, even as he acknowledged it's the law of the land.
That's something.
So it was alarming, Representative Don Bacon in Nebraska told me. Bacon, a Republican who narrowly won re-election, called the White House after reading the text of last week's executive order to seek assurance that money he'd secure for Nebraska, including $73 million to upgrade Omaha's airport, wouldn't be stopped. In fact, the confusion became so intense that a day after Trump signed the order, the White House issued a memo seeking to clarify its scope that seemed to narrow its impact and open the door for some spending to continue. Whether the funding pause constitutes an illegal impoundment is unclear. The executive branch does have some latitude in terms of how it spends the money. More broadly, executive orders are frequently less consequential than they appear. Nicholas Bagley, law professor at University of Michigan, told me about last week's directive. It's one thing to try to get a really nice headline, and it's another thing altogether to decline to spend money that people are expecting you to spend. I wouldn't be surprised if rhetoric doesn't match reality, which is a fancy way of saying, look, you did this for the headlines. You didn't really care what happens after that.
Yes.
The fight's going to wind up in court. Van Hollen told me he believes the court would rule against Trump, that preferably the dispute doesn't go that far. Beyond the question of legality, Van Hollen warned that Trump's orders would jeopardize virtually all negotiations over spending on Capitol Hill. And there were early signs of GOP pushback on last week's spending freeze, but it fell well short of a revolt. On the Republican side, the fight must be left to lawmakers such as Bacon, who has some protection from presidential retribution because he represents a purple district. The GOP should go after policies it opposes through legislation, not executive order. And that's all well and good. So we still don't know how it's going to, fall out in the end. But it's pretty clear that people aren't just rolling over and letting Trump do it. The question is, the opposition that they put up isn't enough. And that's unfortunately going to depend on the courts. And I hate depending on the courts.
Yeah, it's that too is unpredictable, and it's there's a lot of foundational operation of the United States government that depends on courts being more predictable than this.
Sort of a semi-interesting thing, though, is because it'll be the opposition bringing up the suits. They won't be bringing them all up in Texas.
Right, that's true too.
Or the Mar-a-Lago district in Florida.
Right.
So all of a sudden, we may find that the courts are a little more reasonable than what we've been used to in the last 2 years.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff will be. I mean, because this is
because
federal
they're not
government.
judge shopping, or if they are, they're judge shopping for better judges than the ones that Trump was judge shopping.
Well,
for.
yeah, it's not hard to. You don't have to shop to find judges better than them. You can just do it by dartboard if you want.
So again, that's part of the dynamic that we're going to wind up seeing, and that's why it's not all doom and gloom. Everything is just predictable. Trump's going to win every. No, that's not really what we're looking forward to. What we're looking forward to is lots of fights, and we don't know who's going to win, but it's not automatic. He doesn't automatically win and become king.
They're depending a great deal on generating a lot of headlines that depress people. How come he keeps winning? Well, hold on. It's just him declaring victory early. This is how he handles his campaigns.
And what I'm saying is the price of eggs and having your money shut off in your district when you're a Trump voter is going to break through way, way more than some headline in the New York Times that's gone in 24 hours.
That is true. And, I mean, but there's all of these different things are at play here, and they're all fairly familiar Trump tactics. Grab headlines, claim grandiose powers, find out a week later that you don't have them. But the point is, the headline said we did. Some people who are thinking about opposing us will see that and get despondent or afraid and turn around and not participate in pushing back. But then the effects of the decision may end up motivating. I'm very depressed that this happened, but now I'm furious and I'm coming back.
Said rage is motivational. Yeah. It's exactly what I meant.
Well, at least we got.
And it turns out that some of that rage is going to be coming from Republicans and Trump voters.
Yeah, all right. Good. I'm happy with that.
Just
there's
takes
a South Dakota
again,
farmer I've been watching.
A week and a couple of days. You can't expect everything to turn around that quickly. But Trump is doing his best to motivate people, as Aaron Fritschner noted. It's like a government shutdown, as you noted, and that does not go well to the party in favor of the party that did it.
Yeah. We can check back with that South Dakota farmer to see whether his price support payments for the milk were coming through or not. But we forgot about that.
For example.
Already.
Yes.
Yeah.
They really should. They should go back and ask them about all this stuff.
Every time something goes wrong.
You said that Trump would never really get rid of all, but look what happened. What's happening now? What's happening with your workers? And what's happening with your milk supports? Tell me about it.
I don't know.
You still support him?
Well, I heard they were turned off, but by the end of the day, they were back on. Okay, but did you freak out for a second? Is this bad? Should he not be doing this to you?
Are you happy that this is what you've elected?
For now, until they get my workers. All right. Well, I guess that's next.
I don't know.
They didn't turn that off.
Did you vote for him so he would do this to everybody else but you? Why don't you just ask him that?
Yeah. They might say yes to that. And
okay,
fine,
but at least
put
get
it
him
on
the
record. Yeah, right.
Let's
don't
understand
vote for
where
that
we are
guy.
on this.
And also, I don't buy his milk.
Yeah.
It's sour.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, he's probably selling it raw to RFK Jr.
Right. Trump alarms Denmark in an icy exchange over Greenland.
Yes.
You got to love that headline. That's in the New York Times. President Trump told Denmark's leader he wanted to take over Greenland. European officials say Denmark has asked its EU allies not to inflame the situation until Trump's intentions are clear. So that outrage is on hold. Another outrage on hold is Mark Zaid writing in the New York Times. Trump is making it very hard to be a government whistleblower by firing all the inspectors general, which is another outrage.
Yes,
which itself is
time on that one yet.
Potentially illegal because he didn't give notice. Now, eventually he'll get his way with that.
Yeah, this is notice.
But, to have the headline saying Trump tried to do something and then got taken to court because it's illegal, I don't mind that headline either.
Yeah,
I don't know that that's the headline Trump wanted.
No, we used to keep track of those with the, you're real good at getting stuff done or whatever back on Twitter days. There was a good 70, 80 entries in that by the end of just his completely getting trounced in court. He's not good in court. Court usually doesn't go that well for him.
Department of Government Efficiency is saving the federal government $1 billion a day, mostly from stopping the hiring of people into unnecessary positions. Deletion of DEI, says Doge. James Surowiecki says, these tweets are reminiscent of Soviet proclamations about how much wheat production has risen. They're unaudited. They're uncheckable.
Right.
They could just as easily say Doge is saving the government $5 billion a day. Who would know?
Yeah. Well, what did they say? 100? I thought they said 100.
$1 billion a day. $1
billion. Yeah, right. They could just up it to, why not? It's a trillion. Make it a trillion. They don't know how much the budget is, so why not? They got that number wrong. They could make any of these numbers wrong. There's no saving anything going on.
Right.
Okay. Well, it all sounds like garbage to me. And as it turns out, it mostly is. And that's going to be writ large across the entire federal government. People point this out in all areas of interest. You're just not going to be able to rely on things that purport to be government data anymore, mostly because a lot of it will not actually be government data. It will come from people who are awaiting their confirmation to join government, but who just write nonsense in an email. Like, click here to get $500,000 of retirement money. No, you're not going to get it. We saved $1 billion. No, you didn't. Right.
And then, again, it's the small stuff. If the big stuff is just like there's too much, pick something small and go for that and call it an outrage and defend it.
Yeah, you can do
Fox
that.
exclusive, Hegseth pulling General Milley security detail and clearance immediately, may face demotion and retirement. Hegseth ordering a new Inspector General to investigate Milley. Inspector General to investigate General. Orders removal of second portrait. Far too many people, writes Sarah Long, will mistake petty stuff like this for strength instead of what it obviously is, the action of weak, small, insecure men who recoil when faced with integrity. Milley is everything they aren't. That's all true. but make noise about it is what I'm saying.
Yes, and we failed to make noise about it so far, but it's another one of the stories that they flooded the zone with. Right down to, you mentioned, this is the second time. There are portraits of the general in the Pentagon, and that's how they're governing. Take that down. I don't want to see a picture. Everyone remembers them having to cover up the name of the USS McCain when Trump visited.
Right.
I don't want to see
the
his
ship
name.
to turn so you wouldn't see the name.
Yeah. Right. I mean, just
Can't
ridiculous.
happen.
Not
Ships
to mention
don't turn that fast, but that's okay.
the very important point that kind of got glossed over and all that was they're actually working to demote, to strip rank from Milley.
Yeah.
He's a 4-star general, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Well, we're gonna demote you and pay you less money. And who ordered it? Some jackass major from the National Guard who got kicked out of inauguration duty, who's a drunk, as
a
it
blackout
happens.
drunk.
And, and he's like, we're gonna demote you. You can't demote me. Right? Yeah. I don't even remember what that guy did.
Either. Anyway,
yeah.
That's it for me for today.
Okay. Right. And we're not even going to strip you of rank. Okay, I appreciate it. We're pretty much all the way there. It's another 30 seconds or a minute till we start the music.
Yeah, and if I don't finish
got you
all the way to the end,
right.
Cut my pay in half.
That's right. I saved $1 billion by not paying him. I didn't tell you I gave you a raise. Yeah, I gave you a raise, but I'm rescinding it. Greg. Okay. Well, we're all paid what. We're all paid what we're worth eventually. Oh, my gosh.
We're not.
All right.
That's the point. We're all underpaid because exactly that.
Yeah. Click here if you want $1 million, though.
Yeah.
I'm not authorized to offer that to you, but what the hell. Okay. I'll try and straighten out some of the technical aspects of this if I can find the right
you're going to make this
Blue
Friday?
Sky posts. Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
That's one of the technical aspects.
I was so sure.
Anyway, take care. I'll talk to you tomorrow, which is Thursday.
Yes. Thank you very much.
For your listeners, in case you were wondering.
I heard Friday.
Unless you're listening by podcast, in which case it could be, I don't know what.
Right. This is the future. It's a rerun. It could be. All right. I appreciate it. The musical cue now. There we are. And we're right on time. Excellent. Thanks for bringing us all the way to the hour. We could do this every day because there's a billion things going on. But why would we want to?
Because when else do I get to talk with my friend David?
Yeah.
Take care.
Or around or near, anyway. Okay. Very good. We'll see you in 24 hours minus 1. 23 hours until the next time you appear. And
savings. We're already saving hours.
That's right. Well, daylight savings time worth so much more this time. All right. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm going to have to track these things down, I guess, one at a time. And just open these up and make sure I've got the right ones. But I mentioned to you that there was some very weird stuff going on, and that we had entered this very weird place. Right up, I guess nothing's ever going to top forging electoral college votes in terms of audacity, I suppose. But a lot of the fakery going on yesterday was very troubling, to say the least. Where can we start with all of this? Maybe here, with the what is this? I have to check on what I've got here. Oh, okay, that is a slightly different story, but I'll keep it open. But I think tracking the provenance of this story of the email weirdness, we can start with Wired magazine, which I don't know whether they publish on paper anymore. Victoria Elliott is the author of this piece. Elon Musk lackeys have taken over the Office of Personnel Management. So I think this is probably a good baseline for the weirdness of yesterday's story about the emails. Sources tell Wired that the OPM's top layers of management now include individuals linked to XAI. That's like a lowercase x. That's I guess Elon Musk is moving towards naming every one of his companies X something. I mean, he hasn't changed the name of the boring company that does the tunneling, but XAI. What do they do? AI. Okay, so that's right in the name. Who owns it? Trump. Not Trump, but the other guy, Elon Musk, because it's got an X in it. Get it? So, sources tell Wired that the OPM's top layers of management now include individuals linked to XAI, Neuralink, his other crazy thing, the brain implant, the Boring Company, there it is, and Palantir, which is not his company per se, but is Peter Thiel's. One expert found the takeover reminiscent of Stalin. Well, how so? Tell us. Centibillionaire Elon Musk's takeover of the former U.S. digital service. There was such a thing, and they now are calling it United States Doge service. They found a place to park Doge. They took an existing entity and changed the name and said, here you go. Well, his takeover has been widely publicized and sanctioned by one of President Donald Trump's many executive orders, purportedly. But Wired reporting shows that Musk's influence extends even further and into an even more consequential government agency. The U.S. Digital Service wouldn't be a particularly consequential agency. Sources within the federal government tell Wired that the highest ranks of the Office of Personnel Management, OPM, essentially the human resources function for the entire federal government, are now controlled by people with connections to Musk and to the tech industry. Among them is a person who, according to an online resume, was set to start college last fall. Now, look, everybody, sometimes people get around to college later in life, right? But you might hope that you had, in fact, graduated from college before you take over the management of such an enormous enterprise, the OPM. But as it turns out, no, this was a person who was set to start college last fall because he had just graduated high school. You know, meritocracy, right? We got to stop the DEI hiring and hire people based on their accomplishments and merit. Now, he doesn't have any accomplishments. He may have lots of merit, but this is essentially, I mean, if they're anything like they're, cracked up to be, it's because somebody who considers themselves a genius thinks, hey, this guy could also be a genius. What the hell? Let's put him in charge. But, yeah, again, usually they graduate college first or start college. Scott Cooper. It's not Cooper. It's Kupor. Well, Scott Cooper, I'm imagining that's the pronunciation, a managing partner at the powerful investment firm Andreessen Horowitz. Mark Anderson, another local wackadoodle who thinks they control the government these days, stands as Trump's nominee to run the OPM. So Russ Vought is the nominee to run OMB. Scott Cooper, the nominee to run OPM. But already in place over at OPM, according to sources, are a variety of people who seem ready to carry out Musk's mission of cutting staff and disrupting the government. Amanda Scales, I guess that's the name, right? That's how it's pronounced. And I don't know whether it has any weird, or that's how it's spelled. I don't know if it has any weird pronunciation. Amanda Scales is, as has been reported, the new chief of staff at the OPM, not the director of the OPM, but the new chief of staff. She formerly worked in talent, that would be, I guess, human resources, for XAI, Musk's artificial intelligence company, according to her LinkedIn. Before that, she was part of the talent and operations team at Human Capital, a venture firm with investments in the defense tech startup Anduril, and the political betting platform Kalshi. That's probably the least convincing of her credentials, I would think, but okay. Before that, she worked for years at Uber. Her placement in this role, experts believe, seems part of a broader pattern of the traditionally apolitical OPM being converted to use as a political tool. I don't think it's alarmist to say there's a much more sophisticated plan to monitor and enforce loyalty than there was in the first term, says one of our favorites, Don Moynihan, professor of public policy at the University of Michigan. Sources say that another person now in place, Riccardo Biasini, formerly an engineer at Tesla and most recently director of operations for the Las Vegas Loop at the Boring Company, Musk's tunnel building operation, is also at the OPM as senior advisor to the director not having been put in place yet. Steve Davis, the CEO of the Boring Company, is rumored to be advising Musk on cuts to be made via Doge, and was integral in Musk's gutting of Twitter, now called X, of course, after his takeover of the company in 2022. According to the same sources, other people at the top of the new OPM food chain include two people with apparent software engineering backgrounds. Not necessarily what you would think of in terms of personnel management, whom Wired is not naming because of their ages. That's a pretty unusual thing to be doing, given that you're talking about people in top leadership of an enormously powerful and enormously responsible government agency. Who's going to be leading it? I can't tell you. What do you mean? What happened to government transparency? I know it's not that I'm keeping it secret for the sake of keeping it secret. I'm not telling you because the people being put in charge might be minors. Really? How could that? I guess we never foresaw that happening because ordinarily you have to be a legal adult to run the Office of Personnel Management. What is happening here? One, a senior advisor to the director. How are they senior? I don't know. They're a senior in college, maybe. Is a 21-year-old who isn't that person not a minor then? Maybe they're afraid they got the age wrong. A 21-year-old whose online resume touts his work for Palantir, the government contractor and analytics firm co-founded by billionaire Peter Thiel, who is its chair. It touts his work, but how much work could he have been doing? Well, I suppose he could have started before college, but at 21, he may still be in college. Thiel is a Trump supporter who helped bankroll the 2022 Senate campaign of his protege, whom you might know now as Vice President J.D. Vance, who previously had done nothing else in politics ever. His first elective office was senator. He did 2 years of the 6 that he won, and now he's vice president. His second job in politics is vice president of the United States. The other, who reports directly to Scales, that they're not naming also, graduated from high school, as we all have, right? Those of us listening to the show mostly have graduated from high school, but he did it in 2024, which you may recognize as the year it was about 3 weeks ago. According to a mirrored copy of an online resume and his high school student magazine. What are his qualifications for being at the upper echelons of OPM? He was a camp counselor. I was too, so I guess I'm thinking about taking over now. And a bicycle mechanic, according to his professional experiences, as well as taking a summer role, an internship, I assume, summer role at Neuralink, Musk's brain-computer interface company. So, camp counselor, bike mechanic, intern at Neuralink, and then spotted by the super genius guy who said, this guy must be a super genius because, after all, he's here at my illustrious company. And I don't know, he once gave me a high five. And so why not put him in charge of this thing? Among the new higher-ups at the OPM is Noah Peters, an attorney whose LinkedIn boasts of his work in litigation representing the National Rifle Association, but at least he's a lawyer, and who has written for right-wing outlets like the Daily Caller and the Federalist, barf. He is now a senior advisor to the director. But again, at least that guy's a somewhat accomplished person. According to metadata associated with a file on the OPM website, Peters authored the January 27th memo that went out under acting OPM director Charles Ezell's, I don't know how he pronounces this, E-Z-E-L-L, Ezell's name, describing how the department would be implementing one of Trump's executive orders, this time the Restoring Accountability to Policy Influencing Positions Within the Federal Workforce was the name of that executive order. That's the be loyal or I'll fire you one. This has to do with what is sometimes known as Schedule F, a plan to recategorize many civil service jobs as political appointees, meaning that they would be tied to the specific agenda of an administration rather than viewed as career government workers. The order would essentially allow for certain career civil servants to be removed in favor of Trump loyalists by classifying them as political appointees, a key part of the Project 2025 plan for remaking the government. By the way, for the last 100+ years, the trend has been toward civil, non-political civil service workers filling important roles, right? Less political appointees, less loyalty testing, more technocratic and meritocratic placement. But the people who are here to reinstate meritocracy are here to say the merit we're looking for is political loyalty. Anyway, I think on the tech side, the concern is potentially the use of AI. This is another angle on the problem we hadn't thought about. The use of AI to try and engage in large-scale searches of people's job descriptions and try to identify who would be identified for Schedule F reclassification, says Moynihan. Other top political appointees include, actually, before we even get to that, I mean, you see what Moynihan is talking about here? I thought there was another paragraph here, sort of reiterating the issue here, is that these big brain geniuses say they can overhaul the entire federal government by replacing all the useless people or getting rid of all the useless people and and when people are replacing them with Trumpsters. But how can you handle so many people? So millions of workers, I guess. Or certainly hundreds of thousands. Yeah, I think probably, I don't know what the numbers are in total employment by the federal government. If you include everybody, given that we just heard the other day that there's 400,000 at the VA alone, I guess it's probably okay to go with millions of federal workers. How would you sort them out? Well, we'll just ask AI. It won't be Chat GPT, but ask XAI a question. Give me the names of every federal employee that we should fire. Of course, you need to feed into that database the names of all the federal employees, and there's no master list. We'll get to that in a minute, but I hinted at it earlier. They're beginning to create one. And the issue is asking AI anything is probably a bad idea. Certainly something that, as consequential as this, and that may have consequences of ruining people's lives, careers, livelihoods, etc. Asking AI what to do and then just doing that, it doesn't even bring your special brain expertise to anything. But then what else do you think a bicycle mechanic turned OPM top staffer is going to do? What else would he draw on for advice on working at that scale? Anyway, they shift gears a little bit here by telling us more about other top weirdos, including McLaurin Pinover. I'm guessing again here at pronunciations. This, though, a former communications director for Republican Congressman Joe Uli Wilson, and deputy communications director for Republican Congressman Michael McCall, and Joanna Wisher, a Trump campaign speechwriter. Oh, well, the birds have something to say about that. Thank you very much. The angry birds are out, and they should be angry. OPM is not a very politicized organization, ordinarily, I would add, says Stephen Kellman, a professor emeritus at Harvard's John F. Kennedy School of Government. My guess is that typically, in the past, there have been only one or maybe two political appointees in all of OPM. All the rest are career. So this seems like a very political heavy presence in an organization that is not very political. Another OPM memo concerning the government's new return to office mandate appears, according to the metadata, to have been authored by someone other than the acting director Ezel. So who wrote it? Well, the metadata says it was James Shirk. Rhymes with jerk, I guess, but with an SH, previously at the America First Policy Institute, and author, of course, of an op-ed advocating for the president to be able to fire bureaucrats, a pro-Schedule F guy, obviously. Formerly a special assistant to the president during Trump's first term, he is now part of the White House Domestic Policy Council. That return to office policy, according to the November Wall Street Journal op-ed authored by Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, remember him, is explicitly geared toward forcing the attrition of federal employees. That's an important point about the return to office, return to work / return to office. Probably a bad name for it, a little bit like right to work. Obviously sort of slanted in its viewpoint. But the return to office thing was essentially an idea that they had saying we can make work so miserable for people and commuting so miserable for people and finding workspace for people, which is so impossible, make more of their lives miserable that they'll quit. And that's how we'll reduce the workforce. That seems to be the thinking behind it. Last week, many federal workers received test emails from the email address hr@opm.gov. That is not a previously existing account, and there would be very little reason to use it. And of course, most government emails, you actually have your name on them. They don't have generalized, unnamed position emails, hr@opm.gov. What did they get? Well, in a lawsuit filed last night, a couple nights ago at this point, plaintiffs allege that a new email list started by the Trump administration may be compromising the data of federal employees. I mentioned earlier, right? They wanted to put together a massive list of all federal employees so that HR, whatever that is, could email them all and either tell them to report back to the office or that they were all fired or click here for a buyout that doesn't really exist. And there is no such list, and there's no such list for lots of reasons, up to and including information security. At a broadest level, the concern is that the technologists are playing a role to monitor employees and to target those who will be downsized, says Moynihan. It is difficult in the federal government to actually evaluate who is performing well or performing poorly. So doing it on some sort of mass automated scale, where you think using some sort of data analysis or AI would automate that process, I think is an invitation to make errors. That paragraph really belonged up, a few ahead. That's the one I thought he was going to follow up on. The AI is just not geared for this, but it's the crutch of people who don't know, who don't have any other skills to lean on because they are in high school. And though they're probably very smart and maybe even like playing with computers, they don't really have any basis to make decisions on who's efficient in their job that they have never heard of before or don't know what they do. But they think they can ask AI, and because AI is a computer, it'll never be wrong, but it can in fact be very wrong, as we have seen on a number of less consequential issues. Or they might even think it might even be a brain genius with lots of experience in the corporate world who also thinks, well, data analysis has been very successful for me in figuring out which manufacturing plants to close as the least efficient, or how to improve the efficiency of my supply chain for parts at the factory or something like that. And so it must be just as good if I ask it to enter the name of every single employee of the government and make some metrics up about what efficiency means to me, and then just hit sort and say, we're going to chop off the lowest 40% of quote unquote performance based on the quote unquote metrics that I made up, but ask the spreadsheet to do some sorting. That's not going to be a particularly insightful way of doing things, and it's going to lead to a lot of misery. Last week, federal employees across the government received emails encouraging them to turn in colleagues, another way of finding some attrition, to turn in colleagues who they believed to be working on diversity, equity, inclusion, and access initiatives. Turn them into the OPM via the email address, another fake non-person address that we don't use in government, DEIA truth@opm.gov. In other words, if you know of an employee in your office who put up a sign that said Happy MLK Jr. Day, you can turn them in and they'll be first on the list to be fired. And if you don't like that person, what a bonus for you. This reminded me, said Kelman, of Soviet Stalinism of turning in your friends to the government. The OPM did not immediately respond to a request for comment, nor did the people whom sources say now sit atop the bureaucracy. I'm not an alarmist person, says Kelman, but I do think that some of the things being described here are very troubling. So, you got to tell Susan Collins about it so that she can get upset. So that's the basic straight reporting take on things. Also circulating on social media and relevant to these stories are a couple of other bits of input here. Let's see if I can't locate them in Pocket. Is this the one that has the story about the buyouts? Yeah, at least one take on these things. This, a Blue Sky post from Mia Sato, a reporter at TheVerge.com, whose posting here is that the buyouts email sent by OPM uses the same headline as what Elon Musk sent to Twitter employees when he took over the company, Fork in the Road. It also has a similar click yes or no form at the end of the email. So government doesn't really work this way. They don't send every government employee, do you want to retire? Yes, no emails. Should be an indication that, like with the OMB memo, you were really getting somebody's idea of communication, a forgery sent under color of law, under color of authority by some branch of the federal government where that authority does not actually exist. Here's the email, I guess. Fork in the road. Below is the email that was sent to federal employees on January 28th, 2025. You may recognize it as yesterday, presenting a deferred resignation offer. If you did not respond to that email and wish to accept the deferred resignation offer, you may do so by following these steps. And don't do this. This is the one you're warned not to respond to and possibly not even to open, because we don't know anything about the integrity of this thing because it didn't come from a real OPM email address, as it turns out. 1. Send an email to hr@opm.gov for your government account, from your government account. Only an email from your .gov or .mil account will be accepted. Type the word resign into the subject line of the email and hit send. That's it. They're basically tricking you into saying, I resign. Oh, but if you do, we're going to give you $1 million. No, you won't. That's just never coming. Put it this way. Wait until the check clears to resign your job, if that's what you're thinking of doing. So here's the email. Deferred resignation email to federal employees, January 28th, 2025. During the first week of his administration, President Trump issued a number of directives concerning the federal workforce. Among those directives, the president required that employees return to in-person work, restored accountability for employees who have policy-making authority, restored accountability for senior career executives, and reformed the federal hiring process to focus on merit, like bicycle mechanics. As a result of the above orders, the reform of the federal workforce, that's the general gist of it. There's 4 screenshots that I'm reading from. And I don't know. It doesn't seem to be all that. It doesn't flow or anything like that. But let's see. For those who wish to be, this is an example of how the thing came from Twitter. For those who wish to be part of the new Twitter, Musk directs employees to click yes on forms linked in the body of the email. Anyway, some direct comparisons to the way he did this in Twitter. I guess that's really the point of what Mia was bringing up. But the contents of the email itself is more than a little troubling, and certainly not written in the language of normal government operations. Let's see. There's also this piece. I got a couple of things. We'll see what we can squeeze in before the break here. This from Jay Willis Jay Willis, in his bio, says, I write about judges' democracy and the 3 raccoons who live in a tree behind my house. Okay. All very interesting topics. This, he says, I'm hearing from federal employees tonight who are getting messages via their agency's emergency notification system. That's different. Not email. Emergency notification system, which is usually reserved for snow-related office closures, things like that. So you get a text, an emergency text from your agency if your office is going to be closed. And the content of the messages in this emergency system are things like, do not respond to that email under any circumstances. We have no idea if any of those promises are real. In order to read this in correct order here, I'm going to have to juggle them around here. But one of 3 messages says, good evening all. You may have received or heard about an email from hr@opm.gov regarding deferred resignation. Please do not respond to this email, all caps, until we have received further guidance from Maine Justice. Okay. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, where we probably talked straight into the break and things began to fade, and we were in an awkward portion of reading the message that some federal workers, if not all federal workers, had received, and which some of them had forwarded to Jay Willis, who passed them on to us. They're kind of out of order for some strange reason, but they are text messages that came over the emergency notification system rather than through email. But I guess it was sent through the emergency notification system to underscore the importance and urgency of getting these things. As people were getting these emails that purported to be offering buyouts for federal employees to retire early and help us trim the federal workforce voluntarily, except they were pointing out there's no authority to make these offers. And this was just a quick text note. Don't respond to the email that asks you to click here if you want to resign, and don't send back resign in your email and expect to be getting this buyout. This is not a program that exists or has approval. You might be the victim of a rug pull in the end here, and they don't care. They probably would be laughing their asses off to find out that 100,000 federal employees bought this obvious hoax and resigned. But I'm only resigning if you give me the money. No, I got your email right here that says you resign. The end. You're out. Change your card key and you're done. But what about my buyout money? What about it? You said I would get it. I'm not the government. I'm just an idiot hacker who sent you an email. Please click here if you want to resign. And you did it. You're dumb. Well, they didn't put it quite so bluntly in this emergency email, but we left off by saying they were saying, please do not respond to this email. until we have received further guidance from Maine Justice so that we can verify its authenticity. So just for a moment here, I got to pause. I don't know who is the employee or where they worked that sent this on to Jay Willis, but the fact that they mentioned Maine Justice could mean one of two things. Maine Justice is sort of how is a shorthand inside the federal government, really among all the branches and all the agencies. But it's in particular, Maine Justice would be shorthand used inside the Justice Department for designating essentially the headquarters of the Department of Justice, the Attorney General and higher-ups in Washington, D.C., not anybody who works in justice, even chiefs of field offices or what have you. There's federal workers all over the country who work for the Department of Justice. Maine Justice is basically, corporate HQ for justice. So it appears to me this might be somebody who forwarded this to Jay Willis, might be a DOJ employee somewhere. But it could also be the case that they're just a Department of Agriculture employee somewhere, and they literally are saying, don't respond to this until we check with the Justice Department to find out if this is real and legal. It's not, I'm checking with the head of the Agriculture Department to find out whether there really is a buyout for the Department of Agriculture people. I'm checking with Justice. Is this legal? So I'm not sure. But either way, it's not very good. You see what they're saying? Don't respond to this email until we have received further guidance from the Justice Department so that we can verify its authenticity. You may have been emailed by a Nigerian prince person, for all we know, and you're just being hoaxed. Following the email's instructions, it notes, may have serious implications for your pension. That was all in all caps. And then they say, we will update you when we have more information. Well, that usually grabs people's attention. That could have serious implications for your pension. It could have serious implications for everything. You just resigned to an unknown hacker who intends to use that to blackmail you and push you out of your employment. And maybe terminate your pension as well. Now, there's another piece here that makes it even more ridiculous and frightening. And this one comes to us via Doug Holst. Who's Doug Holst? Just a regular guy, as far as I can tell. But here in response to the story from Wired magazine being shared by Josh Marshall in this case, Doug Holst, brings us a screen cap from a subreddit, Fed News, federal, I guess for federal employees, federal government news, r/Fed News. And this is here's the screen cap. OPM employee here. We are not the bad guys. So, trying to disclaim being a part of this scheme hatched at OPM, allegedly. He says, I'm a current employee of the Office of Personnel Management, OPM. This that I'm using here is a throwaway account for obvious reasons. I'm posting this because people need to know what's going on at OPM. I've been an OPM employee for nearly a decade and a federal employee for almost 20 years. I've never witnessed anything even remotely close to what's happening right now. In short, there's a hostile takeover of the federal civil service. Let me say this in no uncertain terms. OPM has been compromised and taken over, right? So if you, that's the words to alarm you. If you're getting an email purporting to be from OPM, you don't know what it is. You don't know where it's really coming from. And it may look like it comes from OPM. It may even come, actually, in the end, you may find out it really does come from OPM. But OPM has been taken over and compromised is the terminology this person's using. So like if ISIS people stormed the building and took over the airports and took over the desk of the director of the OPM and opened it up and sent an agency-wide email saying everybody has to come to work dressed as monkeys tomorrow. Well, I guess I better do it. Well, you're doing it because you think you're getting an email from the director of OPM, but you're not. You're just getting an email from that account that's been taken over by someone else. Well, it's actually worse than that. OPM Though they've been compromised and taken over, it gets worse. The very backbone of American government, the HR of all HR in the U.S. government, has been taken over by outside politicals. In just 5 days, they managed to push aside dozens of non-political career civil servants who were there specifically to prevent the civil service from becoming the president's henchmen. The current acting director, Charles Chuck Ezel, is a low-level branch chief. In case you were like, well, who is that guy? I don't remember ever hearing his name. Well, you may never have heard the names of the people who worked at OPM. But as it turns out, he's a low-level branch chief. He's basically the Jeffrey Clark of the OPM, is what I would say to this. They basically fired everybody above him and then said, you're now the highest-ranking guy. You're our guy. You said you would be loyal to us. We fired everybody who refused to do this, and you're what's left. So the current acting director, Chuck Ezel, is a low-level branch chief. He's the friendliest yes man you'll ever meet. He never says no. It's clear they pushed aside all the high-level non-political civil servants who refused to do Donald Trump's bidding until they found Chuck. Under his name, they've sent numerous requests to all the agencies to collect information on government employees that they see as a threat to their agenda. Instructions say to send these lists to Amanda Scales. Right? Make a list of everybody you think is going to be trouble, who's going to resist the Trump agenda inside your agency, and send it to Amanda Scales. But just like Russ Vought, we got a problem. Amanda is not actually an OPM employee. She works for Elon Musk. She wasn't even properly cleared by OPM personnel security. Our CIO, Melvin Brown, also a non-political career public servant, was pushed aside just 1 week into his tenure because he refused to set up email lists to send out direct communications to all career civil servants. Such communications are normally left up to each agency, right? So that way you're getting, the real McCoy when that stuff happens, to borrow the phrase from the song we heard the other day, right? Or did we? Was that the one we heard? All right, maybe not. Anyway, that was just supposed to be a side joke anyway, but you need to know that you're getting a real communication from your agency. Each agency can do agency-wide emails, but there's no master list of all people who work for the federal government in all agencies as an email list. Anyway, they decided they wanted to set something like that up. So how did they do it? This is kind of intriguing. So such communications normally left up to each agency, but instead an on-prem, as in on-premises, on-site email server was set up. They carried some new equipment into OPM and said, we're going to set up a different email server. Someone literally walked into our building and plugged in an email server to our network to make it appear that emails were coming from OPM. How's that? You like that? They just basically, they had access to the building. Trump won. These are his appointees to OPM. They carried in their own email servers. I remember when doing that and having your own private email servers was a real problem. Like you weren't allowed to be president. You couldn't be elected president. That would be a huge compromise. And we're going to prosecute that, as a matter of fact, as a huge breach of security. No? Well, and then they, of course, didn't, but then went on to do it themselves. And they're now doing it again. But they bring in their own email server so they can spoof emails from OPM. And tell people, yes, OPM is emailing you because you're a federal employee and we're emailing you directly rather than going the normal way through your agency. But you can totally believe it because it has an opm.gov address. And who could spoof that? Well, somebody who has the keys to the building and can carry in an email server and just plug it straight in. So an on-prem email server was set up. Someone literally walked into our building and plugged in an email server to our network to make it appear that emails were coming from OPM. It's been the one sending those various test messages you've all seen mentioned in the Wired magazine article. We think they're building a massive email list of all federal employees to generate mass RIF notices. That's reduction in forces, it's layoffs. Mass RIF notices down the road. The non-political civil servants here at OPM are watching helplessly as our government is being systematically dismantled bit by bit. Even the inspector generals, or inspectors general, IGs, even the IGs are being fired to prevent them from investigating the numerous whistleblower complaints we've filed. Please share this and tell the world that OPM is not the bad guy. We're just as helpless to stop this as the rest of our fellow public servants. Hopefully someone out there can help us, but it's looking pretty grim. How do you like that? Forging an email server together. So it just everything. Every document needs to be questioned in its provenance. You can never believe any communication, spoken, written, or otherwise, from the Trump administration. Just highlighting that warning. Wow. Okay. Well, at any rate, I thought that might be of some interest to some of you to find that information out. All right, what else have we got here? Greg mentioned that, of course, there's a lawsuit already in the works fighting against the federal funding, the alleged funding freeze, and that a federal judge has, in fact, already temporarily at least blocked Trump's supposedly temporary freeze on federal grants and loans. The specifics of it are here, as reported by Chris Megarian and Lindsay Whitehurst just this morning. Early hours of this morning, really last night for those of you who stay up late with me. A federal judge on Tuesday temporarily blocked a push from President Donald Trump to pause federal funding while his administration conducts what he says will be an across-the-board ideological review to uproot progressive initiatives. The order capped the most chaotic day for the U.S. government since Trump returned to office, and probably since well before that, with uncertainty over crucial financial lifelines causing panic and confusion among states, schools, and organizations that rely on trillions of dollars from Washington. U.S. District Judge Lauren K. Ali Khan, and that's spelled interestingly, capital A-L-I, capital K-H-A-N, all as one name, Lauren L. Ali Khan, blocked the federal funding freeze only minutes before it was scheduled to take effect. The administrative stay, prompted by a lawsuit brought by nonprofit groups that receive federal money, lasts until Monday afternoon. Another court hearing is scheduled that morning to consider the issue. The White House did not immediately comment on the order, which leaves unresolved a potential constitutional clash over control of taxpayer money. Democrats, who have struggled to gain a foothold during Trump's second term, unleashed on the Republican president, describing his actions as capricious, and that's bad when your standard is arbitrary and capricious, and illegal. Administration officials said the decision to halt loans and grants was necessary to ensure that spending complies with Trump's recent blitz of executive orders. The Republican president wants to increase fossil fuel production, but listing off all the points of his so-called executive orders. But a vaguely worded memo issued by the Office of Management and Budget, combined with incomplete answers from the White House throughout the day, left lawmakers, public officials, and average Americans struggling to figure out what programs would be affected by the pause. Even temporary interruptions in funding could cause layoffs or delays in public services. This sort of came out of the blue, said David Smith, a spokesperson for the Shawnee Mission School District in Kansas, one of countless districts that receive federal funding. Now they're trying to figure out what it means based on zero information. And that's the quote. Democrats argued that the president had no right to unilaterally stop spending money appropriated by Congress, and that's true. Just minutes after Ali Khan made her ruling, Democratic attorneys general from 22 states and the District of Columbia filed their own lawsuit seeking to block and permanently prevent the administration from cutting off federal funding. There is no question this policy is reckless, dangerous, illegal, and unconstitutional, said New York Attorney General Letitia James. Ali Khan, who was appointed by President Joe Biden, questioned how much the details of the funding freeze had been nailed down as she issued her order. It seems like the federal government currently doesn't actually know the full extent of the programs that are going to be subject to the pause. Jessica Morton, an attorney for the National Council of Nonprofits, which brought the suit, said the group has tens of thousands of members around the country who could be affected. But you get the idea. I think we can jump back out of this article now. Now we're going to have dueling quotes about the validity of the orders. But what you need to know is that, as predicted, the federal courts were appealed to right away, and they said, yeah, we can see the irreparable harm, and we feel like we have proper grounds to grant that preliminary injunction, and we'll see you on Monday for further arguments. So that prediction made by a couple of the experts we cited earlier on yesterday appear to be holding true. All right, let's see. A couple other things that we might be able to fit in before the end of the day. Let's see if I can scan quickly and see what are the most ridiculous ones that we haven't gotten a chance to discuss yet. How about this one over from NBC News? This will come as no surprise, but it really should be part of the record. Who's our reporter at NBC? Ken Delanian and Ryan J. Riley, names we call fairly frequently from over at NBC. Trump administration fires DOJ officials who worked on criminal investigations of the president. This should be read alongside the firing of all the inspectors general, which also is highly questionable. They are supposed to serve across administrations as independent figures. They can be fired for cause. And the president can force his way through and fire them for nothing, but there's supposed to be a procedure. Maybe we did discuss this a little bit on Monday, that there's supposed to be a 30-day notice to Congress, and most of the fired inspector generals are standing their ground for the moment and saying, you didn't follow procedure, so I'm not really fired. Now it's just a question of whether the courts will say, all right, well, the 30-day clock can start on the day that he said their firing was effective. It's not effective, but you got to wait 30 days. What are they going to get done in the 30 days? Not really sure, but they can probably leave a pretty good paper trail behind. But this on a parallel track, Trump administration firing DOJ officials for the crime of having investigated Trump's crimes, for which he was in fact convicted in a court of law. So, well, not the one. They weren't investigating the ones he was convicted for. That's true. They were investigating ones that he was almost certainly going to be convicted of, according to Jack Smith's report. The January 6th related case in D.C., and they probably were looking to see if they could get the case reinstated, thrown out by Aileen Cannon for his having stolen classified documents and stuffed them into the bathrooms at his sex club in Florida. Kind of weird. The Justice Department employees, the subheader says, had been involved in special counsel Jack Smith's investigation that led to Trump's classified documents and January 6th cases. The upshot of this, even if we don't get to the end of it, is there were career lawyers at Department of Justice who, when the special counsel said we're going to go forward with this investigation and possibly press charges against the former president, as we can do, they were tasked to help out, and they were assigned a case, and they performed on that case. That's it. That's all they did. That's what they're supposed to be doing. Trump says, oh, I didn't like the case very much, so maybe you shouldn't be working here at the Department of Justice. The Justice Department said Monday that it fired several career lawyers involved in prosecuting Donald Trump, escalating the president's campaign of retribution against his perceived enemies. The employees worked on special counsel Jack Smith's investigation that led to now dismissed indictments against Trump over his handling of classified documents and his efforts to overturn his 2020 election loss in the lead up to the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. And here's the announcement, I guess. Today, who did it? It was another acting person. Acting Attorney General James McHenry terminated the employment of a number of DOJ officials who played a significant role in prosecuting President Trump, a Justice Department official wrote to NBC News. In light of their actions, the Acting Attorney General does not trust these officials to assist in faithfully implementing the president's agenda. This action is consistent with the mission of ending the weaponization of government, which is A, not happening, and 2, there is no mission of ending the weaponization of government, and it's just a matter of, he said so in an executive order, so we're going to do it. And I guess James McHenry was the last man standing at the DOJ who, and the first one who wouldn't say, I won't do it. And so now he's acting attorney general and firing his colleagues. Among those let go, an official familiar with the matter told NBC News, were career prosecutors Molly Gaston, huge names, totally important people, Molly Gaston, J.P. Cooney, Ann McNamara, and Mary Dorman. Jack Smith, resigned this month ahead of Trump's inauguration. Trump's re-election effectively ended the federal criminal cases against him because of the Justice Department's longstanding policies against prosecuting sitting presidents. Trump's New York hush money case, brought by Manhattan Attorney General Alvin Bragg, is the sole criminal case against Trump to have led to a conviction. Trump was sentenced this month to a penalty-free unconditional discharge, making him the first convicted felon to assume the presidency. Okay, I know it's just symbolic, but it's somewhat important. But as I was reading that paragraph, by the way, I was reminded of all the people who said, oh, no, I can't stand it. I hate the Alvin Bragg case being brought against Trump. It's not that he didn't do it, but it's the weakest case, and it's the most speculative of all the theories under which he'll be charged, and it's the least important. We should definitely do these other ones first, except, of course, the timing of the other ones was being delayed over and over again by Aileen Cannon and others who were just, and Trump himself, who just kept filing ridiculous appeal after ridiculous appeal, delaying the start of these trials, such that it ended up that Bragg's was the only one that was permitted to come to trial. And I know people said, well, we can't control the timing of the federal ones, but we should postpone the New York case and have Alvin Bragg delay things and say, well, we'll prosecute this case once the other federal cases have been prosecuted. And then you would never have had it. You wouldn't even have had the conviction that you've got. And which, even though it ended up in a suspended sentence, at least it happened. At least the conviction was entered. It wasn't worth much, but it would have been worth a considerably less had they delayed and taken the advice of people who said, boo-hoo, I don't like this case very much, and put it behind the federal cases. Then you'd have zero. Good planning, by the way. I hope you take that to heart, and think like, maybe I'm not such a great legal strategist. I wasn't being realistic about how zealous the Trump administration would be in delaying things and how pliant our judicial system would be in allowing it. Anyway, the only pending trial, the Georgia election interference case brought by Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, was stymied indefinitely after Willis was booted from the case in December because of conflict of interest allegations, as though conflict of interest is a problem in this country. Trump said throughout the 2024 campaign that all of the investigations were improper and politically motivated witch hunts. He said Democrats had weaponized the Justice Department and tried to use it to undermine his re-election bid. Smith and former Attorney General Merrick Garland repeatedly denied that the investigations were politically motivated. They said Trump's own actions resulted in the criminal probes of his role in the January 6th riot and his failure to return classified documents to the National Archives. All true, of course. Former Justice Department officials and legal experts have long argued that Trump should not retaliate against career civil servants who were simply doing their jobs and in some cases were assigned to the investigations. They said retaliating against the career prosecutors who worked on the Trump cases would have a chilling effect on the Justice Department workforce and undermine future investigations of improper acts by public officials. Firing prosecutors because of cases they were assigned to work on is just unacceptable, said former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance, an NBC News legal contributor. It's anti-rule of law. It's anti-democracy. But it happened. A Justice Department official told NBC News he's playing with the casino's money, with house money. And you know how he is with casinos, right? Whatever the government has to pay out, if any rights are found to be violated, it'll pale in comparison. It's a price he's willing to have the government pay, right? If people sue that they were unlawfully and improperly terminated and there's any kind of a payout, because there should be, they're correct. Well, the government will pay it, not Donald Trump, even though Donald Trump, personally leveraged the power of the government to get this done. That's a good point. The letter sent to the employees who were fired specifically cited their roles in investigating Trump. You played a significant role in prosecuting President Trump, the letter said, according to parts read to NBC News. The proper functioning of government critically depends on the trust superior officials place in their subordinates. Given your significant role in prosecuting the president, I do not believe that the leadership of this department can trust you to assist in implementing the president's agenda faithfully. Even though, they took the assignment, they're pretty faithful. The letter acknowledges that the employees may appeal their decisions to the Federal Merit Systems Protection Board, which adjudicates the discipline of federal employees, although maybe OPM will send out a note that says they're not allowed to work anymore. Former Justice Department lawyer Julie Zebrak, an expert in federal employment law, said career civil servants cannot be summarily fired. They have civil service rights. They have due process rights, she said. And remember when Trump was all about, oh my gosh, where's my due process? Yeah, due process for me. And, we would make it flowery and say, but not for thee. But it's actually in Trump saying, due process for me and screw the rest of you. You can all go to hell. F off. The Justice Department is arguing that the lawyers are not performing properly. And if so, they would be subject to what is known as progressive discipline, including warnings and notice. They must be allowed to hire lawyers before they lose their jobs. There is a reason people say it's so hard to fire federal employees. Usually it is. They're pretending it isn't. Let's see. Hours after his inauguration, Trump issued an executive order ending the weaponization of federal government. So he said it called for the attorney general and other top officials to root out what Trump and his allies see as politicized actions directed against them. Those are the ones that are political, not the ones that we're using to kick you out, of course. You get the idea. All right. Time for us to wrap it up. It's, in fact, past time for us to wrap it up and hand things over to Justice Putnam. He gets a chance at this, too, The West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes up next right here on Netroots Radio, even though we've delayed it quite a bit. I feel like I've filed ridiculous appeals and dragged things out in Aileen Cannon's court. Poor Justice. But it comes up next. Let's see what he's got on tap for you. We'll start off by letting you know that he's looking at Trump's approval ratings plummeting as his meltdown gets worse.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
What else has he got? An Oregon bill would ban new livestock farms in the state's most polluted areas. The founder of a Florida-based neo-Nazi group goes on trial for conspiring to attack Maryland's power grid. And Northwest water managers slam Trump's claim of a giant water valve at the Oregon border. Sounds pretty dumb. Let's hear them do it in their own words next.